Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. In today's video we're going to talk about hot and high operations, as many of you will be experiencing during summer at the moment. Now, I'm taking this to the extremes. I have chosen Jackson Hole Airport here with the ILS Zulu runway 19. Jackson Hole is located at about 6,400 feet, and in July the temperatures can easily reach 27 degrees Celsius or about 80 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends. And that is going to pose some significant challenges for our operation. So let's have a quick look into the approach preparation. You can see we're currently flying at 18,000 feet and we are not very high above the terrain, and that is causing some issues here. So, we'll start with the temperature on the ground there. In Jackson Hole it's currently 27 degrees centigrade at an altitude of 6,400 feet. Now, the temperature in the ICAO standard atmosphere starts at 15 degrees centigrade at mean sea level and then decreases 2 degrees centigrade per 1,000 feet. So, if we have a look at our progress page over here, then you are going to see that with this temperature we are currently 33 degrees warmer than the ICAO standard atmosphere, and that is causing a significant increase in our true airspeed compared to the indicated. You can see it over here at 18,000 right now. We have 284 indicated and the true airspeed is almost 400 knots, and that is going to stay similar when we are approaching our destination airport. So the true airspeed and thereby the ground speed and thereby the total energy of the aircraft are going to be a lot higher than our indicated airspeed, and that has some effects over here. So starting off, we have a high altitude airport located at about 6,450 feet. So what we're going to do in order to slow down, we cannot just start reducing our speed at 10,000 feet, because that would be just 3,000 feet above the ground. So what I've done, I have just rounded it up. Airport elevation rounded up is 7,000 feet. Then I've inserted a speed restriction here, 250 knots below 17,000 feet. And that should help us getting our speed under control a bit. But 250 knots at this temperature is still very, very fast. So there will be more for us to have a look at. And this approach covers the speed problem by its design, with a 180 knot restriction at Sibith. Let's have a quick look into the approach straight away. Over here we have the ILS Zulu 19 from a Tokut, which basically starts over here on the approach chart. And then we have Tokut above 12,900 feet, leading to Watbu. And then we go on to a Dunois above 12,800 feet. Then a right hand turn to Sibith, and over here we have the maximum 180 knots. And that's in the FMC as well, and that's above 11,000 feet from the minimum en route altitude. From there we continue on to Sozov, and then on to the final at Womru. So Sozov, Womru, and then our platform is at Jaksu, or at Jasgu, sorry. Altitude 8,000 feet, now that's just about 1,500 above the airport elevation, so keep that in mind. And then the runway 19, corrected plus 50 feet in the FMC, 6,501 feet. Minimum for the approach, 6,651 feet, that's just 200 feet above the airport elevation that's set up here. And we have frequencies 109.1, can still set those active over here. 109.1 once and twice, with the final approach courses of 187. Now, VNAV is going to get you in here, but you have to be very careful with your airspeed. So on an approach like this, airspeed control is really what you have to be watching for. And you can't just judge it by the indicated airspeed as you would normally do, but you actually have to have a look at the true airspeed and the ground speed as well. So remember I told you about our stabilized approach criteria and how I told you that at 10 miles from the airport we want to have a maximum of 200 knots. Now that is ground speed. So when we are coming in at 180 knots as planned on this procedure, we are likely going to be much faster than 200 knots. So we'll have to reduce our speed even earlier. With the speed reduction also comes the performance penalties, because we simply have less thrust available at temperatures like these. Our engines cannot produce the same amount of thrust that we would get on the ground. So when we are taking our flaps out, when we are taking our gear out, we have to keep in mind that it is going to take more thrust in order to keep the airplane flying the way we want it to do. So I'm going to show you this now. Let's proceed to TOCAT. We'll go into LNAV, VNAV. Okay, doesn't want to go LNAV right now. That's probably due to a test version of the aircraft, or rather due to the latest update release. I'll turn the airplane towards TOCAT manually, and thereafter we'll be able to put it into LNAV. Yeah, it says not on intercept heading down here as well in the FMC, so we'll put it on an intercept heading now, and then we'll be able to intercept as well. Something over here, I have a rather low cruise speed, but I'm going to increase that to 280 knots just to show you how the energy management works over here. So 280 knots, and for the descent I've prepared 280 knots as well, to give the airplane a little bit more challenge on an approach like this. So we'll enter the direct once more, and now LNAV should be available, and it is. Okay. So for now, enjoy the scenery as we pass over it, and then I'm going to talk you through the specials of the approach as we actually fly along. First thing for you to notice here, still 280 knots, giving us 380 knots true airspeed. Also be aware that the glide slope is following a constant angle. However, if you're coming in high temperatures like we have them at the moment, then you will very easily get a steeper glide because of the way that the air expands. All of you will be familiar that when you heat up a bubble of air, it is going to expand. And just as likely, you will have to be aware that coming in high temperatures, the aircraft is going to be at a higher true altitude than the actual indicated altitude. So this means that our actual descent path is steeper coming in hot and high conditions than it would normally be when you came in with the same indicated altitudes but at a lower temperature. So that once again adds to the challenges that we are facing on an approach like this. Right, I'm going to set the altitude down now, 12,900 for a first altitude, so that VNAV can start its descent. And just to give you one more example for the descent rate as we're coming in. Let's say we have an airport where the temperature is 30 degrees and the final approach fix is located 3,000 feet above the airport elevation. Then if we had a standard 3-degree glide path, with the temperature, it would actually become a 3.15 degree glide path. Right, here we go, starting our descent. Now, with the glide slopes getting that much steeper, I'll give you one further example. In southern Spain, there's an airport that we often fly to that has a 3.1 degree glide slope, that's Malaga. And in Malaga it can easily get 40-45 degrees in summer. Now, with 45 degrees temperature, our 3.1 degree glide slope all of a sudden becomes 3.4 degrees. And the 737 is an airplane that has great difficulties managing the speed reduction on final approach. So, all in all, what that means is that the 3.4 degree glide slope really requires you to extend the drag early on, to reduce your speed early on to get the airplane configured. And that is going to be very, very difficult if you don't anticipate this to happen. Likewise, by the way, just to give you an example of that, in cold weather, if the temperature was, for example, 0 degrees centigrade on the ground, and you have a final approach fixed 3,000 feet above the terrain, then a 3 degree glide slope all of a sudden turns into about 2.83 degrees. So that's just something to consider as well. But we're talking about high temperatures here at the moment, and the high elevation, of course, adds into all this problem. So, just to show you that once more, the effect of the high elevation on our approach. We are currently flying with a deviation from the standard atmosphere of plus 31 degrees, plus 30 degrees right now. And if Jackson Hole was to be located at sea level and at a temperature of 30 degrees, then that would be a much lesser deviation, resulting in much less true airspeed effect. We have it here right now, 250 knots, resulting in 325 knots true airspeed. So that's the difference of over 70 knots. Okay, we're crossing Watbu, so we can now descend 12,800 feet. And for now the VNAV is doing a really good job keeping the altitudes under control. But I'll keep the airplane in VNAV, and what you'll have to have a look at on the final approach then is that it really starts reducing the speed early on. By the 10-mile ring over here, you don't want to have more than 200 knots of ground speed, and then reduce 10 knots every mile in. You can see over here the deceleration point prior to Denoir VOR already, and that is round about, make that maybe 8 or 9 miles. So that's quite a distance we're taking it to reduce our airspeed. And watch the true airspeed as our speed reduction is going to happen. And in the meantime, of course, watch the beautiful terrain. Jackson Hole really is a special airport with a great scenic approach. So even when it's not hot and high, do come in here every now and then. It's really recommendable. Okay, after the VOR we can go down to 11,000 feet. Here we are, passing the decel point. We'll slowly start losing our airspeed now, but you will notice how the true airspeed and the ground speed are still really high. So you see I'm really focusing on the speed here. That's because that's what it's all about. When we're coming in a hot and high condition, the indicated airspeed may not be quite what the true airspeed suggests. You can see right now how the airplane struggles to actually lose its speed. The magenta bucket is showing us where the target should be, and the indicator is just staying above it. So I'll use a little bit of speed brake now to actually get the airspeed down to where it's supposed to be. Then at Sibith we want to have 180 knots. But you can see we still have 20 miles to fly and we're still doing about 280 knots right now. So that's really the big problem we have. After Sibif we can go down 9,800 feet, 1 mile prior to the waypoint, provided we're in VNAV we can start reducing our speed. Right, so flaps 1. No, 220 knots, 270 knots true airspeed. And even with the speed brake in the flight detent and the flaps slowly deploying, we still struggle to lose our airspeed. 1 mile prior to Sibif, we'll go down 9,800 feet, flaps 5. "16 miles from touchdown, 240 knots. That slowly starts looking good, but I'll just retract the speed brake again, just to show you how little the airplane is actually losing in airspeed. So, clear for the approach, on the approach mode. After Sozov we descend 8,700 feet. And the view outside is just beautiful on this one. But be aware, we're showing 10,000 feet on the altimeter, but look outside. That's 3,000 to 4,000 feet, not more. Right, so next altitude 8,700. Set. Right, now we have about 170 knots indicated, giving us 205 knots of ground speed. So that's approaching the 10-mile ring. So that's really why you have to configure the airplane so early. In normal ICAO standard atmosphere and sea level conditions, you could fly 200 knots, well maybe 190 knots indicated airspeed at this point. While right now we have our 200 knots and we have 165 knots indicated. And that's really the challenge on this one. So early speed reduction is key. If an air traffic controller would ask me to do 220 knots to the 10-mile ring, I'd have to tell him straight away unable. In a situation like this. Right, approaching Womru, we go down to 8,000 feet. 9 miles to go, 190 knots, that's good. But note that our speed is no longer decreasing here because we are at the flap 5 speed already. Warthog captured. Runway heading 187. Glide stop captured. Missed approach altitude 14,000. Set. Alright, so speed is no longer decreasing, so let's go geared down to flap 15. That's one more specialty of this approach. Now, normally I'd configure the airplane at 4 miles in conditions like this, but watch now, we're 7 miles out and we're running 190 knots ground speed still. And even when we are on final approach speed, let's go to flap 30 now. Even as we reduce to final approach speed, you'll see we are to lose maybe 15 knots over here, so that's going to result in about 160 knots of airspeed. Of ground speed, rather. Right, landing checklist. Start switches. Continuous. We assume landing clearance. I'll put the taxi light on. Speed brake. Armed. Landing gear. Down. Flaps. 30 green light. Now some of you will say, why don't you just use flap 40 for the approach then? Well, the reason is that with the high temperatures we also have degraded go-around performance. So, after all, I'm choosing 30 because of the improved go-around performance, but be aware of the speed. We're flying VRF +5 now, 163 knots of ground speed. Also note that the aircraft will have a tendency to flare less, so still use the normal landing technique, but it's likely going to be a slightly more positive landing. Right, autopilot disconnect, let's fly it down manually, and 500 continue. Also note the increased vertical speed here. Since we're doing 160 knots over ground, we are also doing about 950 feet a minute in order to keep the airplane on the glide slope. Checked.
Minimums.
Continue. Right, I'm going visual here, ignoring that glide.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
And right on the runway. Speed brake up, thrust was normal. Also note the increased stopping distance. I'm using maximum reverse thrust here. But you can see, manual brakes, 100 knots. How it's really hard to get the airplane stopped on a runway like this. Now this was quite close to maximum manual braking. We've just about got the airplane stopped. Now, if you compare this to a lower altitude standard temperatures runway, in my airline we're often landing the aircraft on runways of 1,800 meters, and there's usually quite a bit of room to spare. On this one, we've actually had to put the airplane down with maximum reverse. We had to override the auto brakes in order to get our airplane stopped on time. So, here we are. I'll set the park and brake at this point. And this is going to conclude this video. Hope you found this interesting. If you did, leave a comment, leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so yet. And if you really love my videos, I would absolutely appreciate a small donation using the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. But until then, thank you very much for joining. I hope to see you all on the next one, and maybe on an upcoming live stream. Thank you very much, and have a good day.